to Boys Bible Study. Come one, come all. It's the greatest Christian podcast on earth. Step right up. I'm your host, Ash. As always, I'm here with
Scott,
the great podcaster, Julian.
And we have a really special film today. The Christian short film Parable from 1964. Very influential early Christian allegorical film, much earlier than we tend to cover on the show. Very interesting piece of media. And our guest today who introduced this to us is Grant Moninger. He is the co-founder and co-director of Beyond Fest and the creative director and co-director of programming of American Cinematheque. Grant, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Grant, you told me about this short film. It's really incredible. And the story you told me along with it about how you saw this for the first time is pretty amazing. And I am wondering if that is partially how you are into programming now. So if you could explain to our audience how you first saw this film.
Yeah, so I first saw Parable. I must have been 6, 7, somewhere 8, right in there. And I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, the bottom west corner that you could, where our little league team played West Virginia. That's how rural like that corner is. And we grew up in this valley, and our closest neighbor was like a mile away. It's this guy, Ernie. And so no one lived around. Everyone else was miles away. The only thing that was at the top of our hill was this church that was 100 and some years old, and this old cemetery. And the story I was told is they had to murder a Moninger to start the cemetery because the cemetery is just filled with people with my name in it. It's mainly the people. So it's this old church, and there's a cemetery that just says your name everywhere or your grandmother's name, people you recognize. And there's those old tombstones that are those tiny little white guys that you like have to like scratch with a chalk or something to read the names. It's a bunch of those. And then there's a church. And on Sunday morning, well, that's fine. There's a big sun's out and the people are coming in their best. But on Wednesday nights, they would also have a service, which then was pitch black, dark in the middle of nowhere, where there's like, you hear owls, and you walk into this cold church, and there was just one tiny heater. And so you were like freezing in these old pews, and the wind would be swirling or it would be snowing. So I went to a Wednesday service, and they said they were going to show this film. And I was like, all right, this sounds fun. And I'm the only child here. And I remember sitting in the back, and they set up the projector, and they projected it. And then I don't know if we spoil this or not, but it eventually tells this, it's this hippie parable where this clown gets strung up and like murdered at the end in this horrible fashion. So I remember watching it thinking it was funny at first, and then just being horrified by this screaming clown. And then I'm like just in a weird state. And then they take me outside into the darkness, and there's the cemetery with my name on it. And I keep thinking about the clown. They get me into this cold car and drive me down this wood, like kind of Night of the Living Dead road back to the house. And the whole evening was horrifying and absolutely wonderful. I love that film.
Oh, gorgeous.
That is
story.
incredible.
Whoa. Did you ever find a tombstone with your name on it and your birth year and then like a little shrub covering up the death year?
Yeah. So that was the horrifying moment of Parable. And also it's like, I don't know, I guess it was 16 millimeter, creepy 16 millimeter, which can be the most creepy format ever. And you just have that mono projector, just and there's the weird voice that comes on at the beginning that kind of talks about Christ and tells you these things.
In the Gospels, Jesus teaches us by using parables. Through them comes God's message in simple story form. Today, a parable might begin like this. Once there was a great circus. In the march of nations and peoples, a great circus parade. And into this great circus of life came a man who dared to be different.
Then it's weird kind of unfunny Benny Hill hijinks that then leads up to a clown death. So that combination lures you in as a child. You don't know.
Yeah, it's just a trip to the circus. God, that's horrifying. Do you think you've had any film experiences since then that are as scary as that?
Parable, I think, was the most frightening because my biggest fear as a child was the rapture.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
because they also showed Thief in the Night, which I'm sure you guys have done.
Actually, not yet. It's been permanently on our list. We have yet to officially cover it, but
They showed us that in the social building. And then when I saw that, I was like, the rapture's coming and that's going to be screwed. And then, Parable was more like a gut punch, though, you know?
yeah.
But a good one.
Yeah. Wow. So
That's a lot of
what kind
words.
of what kind of Christianity would you say that you grew up in?
Super Midwest Protestant. And by that, it means like, what's the word? Like suffering and no gloating was our like kind of the thing. Like we
Okay.
used to put on a Christmas pageant, right? And we'd all play shepherds and angels and stuff. And it'd be in that field, you know, in the cemetery, and the shepherds would come through this. It was awesome. And there'd be like mules, and we didn't have camels, but we had everybody else. Sheep and angels would come down. But my aunt refused to put up a flyer in the Giant Eagle grocery store because it was too ungodly, I think, to advertise.
That's so cool. Sorry, I love that shit.
And we'd be like, no one's coming. Why don't you put it in an ad? She's like, no, we could never. That would be gloating, or I don't know what the words were.
Wow.
But so it couldn't do that. We couldn't get on it. And it was an incredible thing. It was like it was like it was at a parable. It would be children and old 90-year-old men dressed as shepherds walking through a cemetery. Then angels would appear, and everyone had their trucks on and their headlights on. And this weird music would come out of the church. It was super trippy. It was fantastic, but no one came because we couldn't advertise it.
Oh man.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
That actually sounds a lot like the way Jehovah's Witnesses operate, because they're also not into gloating at all. And when they make movies, there's no credits at the end.
I mean, you're just doing it for the art.
Yeah, I guess so.
We had here's the tells. I don't know what this says about my family, but there was a preacher that came, and he's not such a good guy, this guy. And he used to make his wife shave him. You know, he's like that kind of guy. Okay. And then my family like really ran the church. There were a bunch of older ladies, but they were like the real runners of the church. And then this preacher came in who made his wife shave him, and he was going to try to run the church. Well, they weren't going to have any of that. Like, he was going to have a new hymnal. Well, that ain't going to happen. So he ended up leaving and said he'll never be back until every Moninger is dead in the ground, he said.
Whoa.
Wow.
Some Robert Mitchum stuff there.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
And he's
How
talking
old were
about-
you when that guy's... Oh, sorry, go on.
So I missed that guy. I was like long gone, but my grandmother was like 99. My aunt was like 78. Like, the people that was his foil that he was angry at were very elderly women, which was fantastic because he was a jerk that made his wife shave his face and whatnot. He's a weird guy. In that same church, we had two pastors. One pastor came. His name was Pastor Stewart, and he liked my dad. And my dad, I never saw him drink anything other than Budweiser, and so he's just always drinking Budweiser, and he never went to church. So everyone was confused why Pastor Stewart's pal was my dad. So they were like, my dad was like, nah, you shouldn't be hanging out with me. Like, you're going to get a bad. So he couldn't hang out with my dad as much, but the one person he liked wasn't the church-going people. It was my dad in the holler. But the guy before him was this guy, Pastor Dawson. And one time he did a sermon about how dogs don't go to heaven. And like 2 weeks earlier, my dog had been run over.
Oh my God.
Run over. So I was like losing it and going crazy. They had to take me out of the church. But his sermon, this guy thought it was a good idea with a church full of kids to talk. Who asked for that? Dogs dying and they don't go to heaven. I was like, lie, man, if you don't feel that way. But anyway, that was that guy. Then his son wound up drowning. And that was the first dead body I ever saw, was the preacher's son. So that's I don't know if that's entertaining, but that's happened.
You lived in like Christian Gummo.
Yeah, it was
It's pretty cool.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just like tourism on the story, but I absolutely love this shit. I would love to go to a Christmas pageant like that. That sounds just fantastic.
They were just in it. They were like really doing it.
Right.
What does God have to gain by not allowing dogs into heaven? Is it because his name is backwards? I think there's something there.
Do you remember what that preacher even said the reasoning was behind that? Like, did he cite a passage in the Bible and was like, see, can't deny it?
I think he was just saying, I think his main idea was that dogs have no souls.
I mean, spot the lie. Like,
I mean, who needed to hear that? You know, the guy that was wearing pipeline all week, or the farmer. Here's a reminder: your cow has no soul. Okay, thanks for that one.
Something we often like to ask our guests, but before we start talking about the film, one thing we often like to ask our guests was like, so, you're obviously, like all of us here, really into media. It's like your life as it is ours. Were you very devout Christian when you were young, and did that change over time? And if so, was there like, was media a cause of that at all?
Oh, wow. That's actually kind of true. So like when I was young, I liked Jesus and all that. It was good stories. But my grandmother, who lived to be 106, she taught Bible school, but she did not teach about Jesus ever. Like, she only did Old Testament because she just liked like the killing and like people turning to salt and like magic and like Jacob and Isaac, like the birthright and the tricksters and the demons. And she loved mainly Exodus and Leviticus is what we mainly studied. And we have to build the tabernacle and then build everything outside. So she was super into this, like, kind of, I don't know, if she was born now, she'd probably love Game of Thrones or something. Like, to her, it was like this some other sort of magical world. So I really dug that. That stuff those are great stories. And then I found out more about Jesus. I was like, all right, this guy. And then I remember we had a thing where we had the church. And I was 14, I guess, 13 maybe. And then one of the people stood up and they wanted to boycott Last Temptation of Christ. And I was like, what? Because I had already seen, of course, like Taxi Driver and King of Comedy and all those movies. So I was like, these people are nuts. So at that point, I was just like, that kind of was my phase out of that church. Mm-hmm. But and to give everyone credit, not everyone at church was in on that. That was kind of a kook that wanted to do that, while the rest of the church were like still very earnest and that. But there's some kooks in there that wanted to cause trouble with the. So it was kind of that media. I was like, all right,
That's interesting. That kind of brings us back to Parable as well, too, because after we watched the short film, we watched the introduction from the director, Rolf Forsberg, and he was talking about how Parable was controversial even before people were seeing it.
Threats came, for example, from somebody from Con Ed, who had an executive position, wrote and said, if you show this film, Christ is a clown. Nobody had seen it, of course. It wasn't finished yet. If you show this film at the fair, well, I'll see that your electricity is cut off, so you can't show it. Another, I think it was a minister from Long Island someplace, actually wrote a letter threatening, if you show the film, I'll come in with my shotgun and shoot holes in the movie screen. I mean, this is the kind of reaction it was getting.
It's pretty similar to your experience for Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah, and a Parable, one of the weird things that they used to do with that, I think it's because what probably happened, in my head, why Parable probably was so big, it was parents who couldn't relate to their teenagers and stuff. And then they saw this, and it's kind of a trippy drug thing, right? In a way, it's kind of a hippie movie. So they thought it was, hey, I can bring our teenagers into that. They're going to dig this. So it was advertised in papers, this and his second film, Ant Keeper, I think it's called. They would be advertised as like super controversial. See the hit. And it was like a church doing almost like a drive-in ad saying, come to this church, see the controversial hit. You decide whether you like it or not. And
Wow.
so, it was like drive-in but church. So they totally
Christploitation.
Yeah, it really was. They used it. So it's cool.
That is very cool. And yeah, I feel like that anecdote actually combined with what you were saying about like Old Testament Christianity, which coincidentally I've been revisiting a bunch of stories from like Genesis and Exodus this week. So it's kind of fresh in my mind. And yeah, it really has this like epic quality, you know, in the style of like Beowulf or you know, epic literature with a lot of like death and demons and bloodshed. And I would say that although Parable is a New Testament allegory, it contains some of that fear, you know, some of that like that sort of evil magic that reminds me of the wonder I felt hearing some of those stories as a young Christian as well. So for that reason, now, you know, we've already discussed, we've brought up some brief moments and background of Parable, but I would love to really get into it now. Maybe we could start with some historical backgrounds and then talk about the events that transpire in the film.
Yeah, I mean, all I know is that this was his first film and he was making it for the World's Fair. And there was a bunch of controversy around it because people found out that he was representing Jesus with a clown character, which sounded pretty inherently blasphemous if you don't want to give it any further thought.
Right.
Which Rolf ended up being pretty into because he is very ahead of his time in that he made it clear that his film, he's going for a feeling over anything directly heavy-handed. And he was aware that if people are talking about your film, whether it's good or bad, people are talking about your film.
It was a lot like the Apocalypse Now of Christian films, where everyone was talking about it being this one thing before they saw it. Then it played the World's Fair, much like Apocalypse Now played the festival, and then became a hit. And it totally turned everyone got hip to it really quick.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're talking about the 1964 New York World's Fair. This is a 1964 film, which makes it among the earliest we've covered for the podcast. I did a bonus episode about Pasolini's Gospel According to St. Matthew, which is another 60s Christian-themed film. But that and this now will be the earliest that we've covered. According to what I can find about it online, it seems like it was relatively influential in a way. I mean, this thing I read about it while we were watching basically says that like it was among, I could be a bit wrong on this. I don't know the full history of Christian film in America, but it seems like it could be among the first times that film was really used in this type of Christian storytelling. I get the feeling that there were probably a lot of Christians maybe before this who thought that like film in general was like sort of like gross medium and, you know, maybe not the best for telling a story like this. And then this film came along and showed that you could do something really artistic with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked when I watch this. I'm shocked to how hip all the Christians were at that time. Like to watch this film and they're like, everyone went to the World's Fair and they're like, hey, we got to ship this movie back to Minnesota, or we got to get this film to play in Louisiana, or whatever it was. That there was a world where this weird hippie Bergman art film about a clown became like a hit at churches.
Yeah.
It's so not square. It's wild.
Yeah. It's really bizarre. It's not quite avant-garde, but it's
getting there.
Anything else you would see at church is a very direct, obvious story, pretty much.
Right. I mean, we had nothing but white Jesuses and, you know.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want white Jesus, this is the movie for you. This is the whitest Jesus.
Yeah.
On film.
Yeah. You know what also I like about it? It starts off with this kind of Rod Serling kind of way of telling about, you know, this is the Jesus Christ and this is a parable, which it obviously like was a kind of an influence, I think, especially the way it was shot and looked, was Twilight Zone, which then begot all the Insight episodes, which were a direct take from Twilight Zone. So to me, it's something. It's the link between Twilight Zone and Insight is Parable.
Grant, this is crazy that this aligns with two episodes we're doing this month, one that's already come out, one that hasn't yet. Because one, we end up getting into talking about Christian mimes. And then the other one is about a short film called The Daylight Zone, which is a Christian Twilight Zone. Oh, wow. And they're both made by the same director, Dave Cristiano, who's one of the two Cristiano brothers. And it lines up pretty well. I wonder when he saw Parable.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like, the director, Rolf Forsberg, he made some claims. After watching the film, we watched actually a short documentary on Forsberg, and he talked in his own words about like the influence that this film had. And I mean, yeah, if it was such a pivotal moment in Christian cinema, then why wouldn't the Cristiano brothers or any of the other directors we like have also seen it when they were young? And
churches didn't have a whole lot of money, a lot of churches. So, it played for decades off of that. And, until the invention of the VCR, probably up until 87, I bet you this played churches all over the place constantly.
Yeah. Wow.
It was so big, he got carte blanche to do the Ant Keeper.
You mentioned Antkeeper, and I did want to bring up, I looked this up on IMDb. It does sound pretty insane. 1966, it's about a gardener who decides to introduce ants to his garden. And then, according to the full summary, he is disturbed when the ants spend all their time fighting. He sends his son to teach them how to live peacefully. Now, what does that remind you of there a little bit?
Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
How big is this guy's son?
He's got a tiny son.
Who, Forsberg's son?
Yeah. Well, the gardener.
Do you know
the gardener's son?
Do you know Rolf Forsberg's son? Eric Forsberg? He does films like Mega Piranha and stuff.
Wait, really?
Right now he's in. I read this. I saw him speak about his father once, but he right now he's in production for a film called, guess this, Clown.
Oh no!
Holy shit!
Wow.
It's all happening.
It's all going full circle.
It's all happening. We live in the most beautiful era of culture there ever was. It's all happening right now.
Now, this year. Grant, what did he say about his dad? What did he say about Rolf?
I think, that I think he mentioned he wasn't on drugs, I think is what he said, but he was like kind of had like a hippie aesthetic, and that he would that the movies would tour around and he would be paid to go to different places to make a movie. But he had to try to wait. This is like 7 years ago, and I was in shock when he was speaking because I was like, "What's all happening?" But he would have to wait to get funding from things, and then he'd go and he'd make his religious parable films, But I don't know. UCLA did a thing in 2013, I think it was, 7 years ago now, and I saw a photo and a pamphlet, and my head exploded because I couldn't tell you the name of this film if for 30 years of my life, if you paid me. Like, I had no idea what this was. I would be like, I always thought they crucified him at the end. In my head, they crucified a clown, but they didn't crucify him. But I would just scream, "But the clown!" So, and no one knew what I was talking about because this isn't like
you're wandering the streets of Los Angeles, tearing your hair out, screaming about the clown, and no one believed you until you finally got to see Parable again later in life.
Yeah, it wasn't at the Blockbuster.
Right.
Yeah. Man, that must be so satisfying. I mean, I've had similar things before, but they ended up being movies that's like, I probably could have found out about that sooner.
You know what movie this is a little like? Did you ever see Rem Lazar?
Oh,
yes.
boy.
Yeah. Scott has a very personal connection to Rem Lazar. What were you saying, Julie?
I just watched it like 2 weeks ago. I had no idea that I don't want to reveal too much about you, Scott, but I didn't know that's where your pseudonyms come from.
Video artist name,
yeah.
That I use for Everything Is Terrible and all that. Rem Lazar.
Oh my God, I did not know
Scott
that.
is Rem Lazar.
Yeah. What's your connection?
The movie creating Rem Lazar really struck a chord with me. It's really weird.
Did you see it as a youngster or an adult?
No, I didn't. I saw it as an adult when I lived in Chicago and was going to the video store Out Obsession, which is one of the best video stores that's ever existed, RIP. But they had like a burned DVD of it there. and me and a couple friends watched it and were like really, really blown away by it. And I just love the idea of this superhero who these kids have imagined in their head. And then he shows up for real and he's like, okay, I need your help, and I need your help now. Like he's like the opposite of a superhero. Like he needs your help. It's beautiful.
But the lead in Parable kind of reminded me a little bit of Rem Lazar. Like, what is this? Why is this the main guy? But
Yeah.
You wonder where it came from.
Why are you here?
I didn't know that about you and Rem Lazar. That's very interesting.
Yeah, yet another movie that was influenced and inspired by Parable, creating Rem Lazar.
So let's take some time and go over the details of Parable. Let's, assuming that our listeners may not get a chance to watch this, let's take them through. I'm sure as we're doing that, some other themes are going to come up. At the end, we'll tie it together with, how this relates to the story of the Bible. But I would love to start off by saying that, it's a mostly silent film. We don't know the names of every character. You can see it on IMDb, but it's not like immediately apparent from watching. We see a man in circus garb filling up buckets of water, and very ominously in the distance appears a clown painted completely white face,
like powder.
Powder. If gentle listeners, if you're familiar with the very important movie Powder, you have sort of a visual point of reference for what our protagonist ends up looking like in this film. A very white man who is a clown, and he enters the scene. He steals this man's buckets of water and wanders back to the circus, and this is where
and we don't mean
begins.
Washington D.C.
Got him.
Yeah. So he brings the water for the elephants. Another thing that's probably inspired by Parable, the movie Water for Elephants. He brings these buckets of water over to the elephants while the elephant hand chases him. Because I don't know, it seems very stressful for some complete stranger to just start doing your job for you.
That had to be all the budget was getting that elephant.
That's true. There were
Now
live
that you
elements,
mention- well,
live
yeah.
elephants in the film.
Because the actor was with the it wasn't stock footage. It was a real elephant.
No, that's true. I didn't really process
Yeah.
that as we were watching, but I mean, yeah, that's a huge investment of skill and money, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no CG elephants here.
Yeah, somebody at your church doesn't just have that.
Yeah, so he brings the elephants the water, and then I think he with the elephant hand in tow walk over to the dunk tank where a man is sitting on a piece of wood above a tank of water, and then like a guy who looks like kind of a pissed off businessman kind of guy or salesman is doing a very bad job of trying to knock him into the tank. He's throwing wild pitch after wild pitch. And what happens? This mystery white man comes and takes the guy's place in the dunk tank. And that just pisses the salesman off. And he still can't hit the tank, but he eventually gets the guy in the water. Dunks Jesus.
Yeah, so I will say we're starting to see a pattern where I've got to say at first starting the film, I was a bit going into it thinking it would be a biblical allegory. I was a bit left in the dark for the first couple minutes. But, we start to see this motif of the clown character taking the place of the roles of people in their circus jobs. So, who can we think of in the Bible who was sent to take our place as far as judgment and sin goes? I'm just going to plant
Take
that
our
seed.
jobs.
Right.
Jesus. The answer is Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're looking for?
No shit.
One thing you could say is like if you're trying to picture the acting that's going on, it's kind of like the weird 16 millimeter parts of like either Sesame Street or Electric Company or something where people are throwing their hats on the ground and they're raising their fists and they're moving kind of extra fast.
Very vaudevillian.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. It's hippie vaudeville.
That shit's so annoying. I'm just going to say it. I hate this era of like art house stuff. They're like, it's so obnoxious. And And people are still doing that today, like making fun of. It's like when you see something today and it's like ironically doing like a 50s sitcom or something. And it's like, that was fucking 60 years ago. We move on.
All influenced by Parable. Nobody can move beyond Parable.
All media can basically be classified as BP or AP. Actually, until Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch then became the new film that marked an era of culture. It was basically Parable and then Blair Witch are the pieces of media that changed all media forever.
Hey, I went to college with her. She used to stick a cork in my mouth.
With
What?
What?
Yeah, Heather Donahue. She's growing weed up in Northern California now. But Heather Donahue, the lady in the Blair Witch.
How
Had
really?
the snot.
I had a
Whoa.
speech. She was my speech tutor, and she used to stick a cork in my mouth, and I have to go like ha ho, ha hoo, and then the Blair Witch lady would be like, "That's not it. It's this ha ho, ha hoo," and I'd be like, no, Blair Witch lady, I think it's this ha hoo, and I'm from Pittsburgh, so my O's are real bad, so I'd be like ha hoo, ha huh, and then Blair Witch would be like, no.
Story.
Was she already in the Blair Witch Project when this was
No,
happening?
we just called her that.
Oh, okay. Wait,
That's
was
what
she
she got
even in the Blair Witch Project?
No, we didn't call her that then. We called her Heather.
Oh.
But yeah, then
Okay.
later on,
Yeah.
she went on to star in the Blair Witch, and
see.
now I think she grows marijuana up in northern
Whoa.
California.
She had the snot coming out of her nose
Yeah, she
in
did.
the one scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, she used
Wow.
to stick a cork in my mouth. What were we talking about? Hey, so far we're describing this movie. It's not very scary. It seems like a lot of fun, right? Parable so far in the plot.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
kids would love this movie
But
because I was thinking this the whole time. Is this movie for children?
no, I don't think so. I don't think it's a kids movie.
Okay.
I personally think that, you know, it has the circus allegory and, you know, it's silent but you know, which I could see those things tend to be like involved in teaching tools for like, you know, young kids. You could technically show this to a kid who hadn't developed full sense of language yet, but I think it would be far too scary. I think this is an allegory meant for like artistic like audiences, you know,
Yeah.
adult audiences.
I mean, it would be for kids in like an MK Ultra kind of way.
Right.
Like it's more like an experiment. Like what's going to happen?
This is what they showed Ted Kaczynski in college.
Yeah.
I didn't turn out right, so I wouldn't advise it to anyone.
But where does our clown go next?
Well, next we see the what's his name? The Great Magnus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Magnus the Great, something like that. Magnus is in action at the circus, putting on a circus, doing his live marionette show where he puppeteers actual people in puppet costumes high above the ring. And lots of children sit and laugh at this.
Yeah, they're acting out like a Punch and Judy show, but it's suspended from the top of the circus tent, and there's actors, being hung from ropes, pretending to be marionettes. Whereas Magnus is notably in the imagery of the film, he is puppeteering them from what appears to be under the stage rather than over, because they're being suspended from the top, the ropes are emanating from the bottom, and he's pulling at them. I mean, it's clear he doesn't really like need to do this to operate the show. It's just like a visual allegory. And honestly, it kind of reminded me of Matthew Barney, Cremister Cycle, when the people in the blimps are like controlling the stuff down on the field. I was like, damn, yet another film influenced by Parable. Matthew Barney owes his whole career to Parable. Incredible. The living marionette show, I think, is one of the most striking visual images in this whole piece. All the children watching, the people strung up, and the clown bringing his, so all the people that he's freeing from their earthly burdens start to follow him. They're walking behind him. The clown sort of invades this living marionette show and decides to essentially sabotage it.
Wasn't one of the puppet guys, didn't they have like almost like a dark clan outfit? It was like an executioner kind of hood.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I thought. An executioner hood.
Yeah, it was frightening.
Yes.
I wonder if that's from. Well, I don't know. I know that the two puppets that weren't in like the executioner garb were supposed to be Punch and Judy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the the person in the black executioner's mask, if that's a part of Punch and Judy, or
The
if that's
throuple.
like it's
Punch and Judy's third is the executioner.
their unicorn. But I do know that either way, it proved to be like a very striking visual moment in the film. It was very disturbing.
Where do you think they shot that ceiling?
It looked like a Skinner box. That's
What's
just what
that?
it looked like to me.
I don't know what that is.
Oh, it's like a geodesic dome kind of thing.
Oh.
Yeah, that's just what it looked like to me. I'm not trying to
Got to
imply
get us
anything.
an elephant and a geodesic dome, and we're ready to go, guys. Who's got
But
it?
I also think they were only suspended like a couple feet above the ground, just from the way that was shot. They
Probably.
blew all their money on the elephants. There's no way that they were hanging there.
But yeah, the clown starts to destroy the show in its conventional sense. But what he's actually doing is liberating the players. These people suspended, hung helplessly on their living marionette strings. He lowers them down to the ground.
He also frees the audience too.
Oh yeah,
We're
that's
wrapped
right.
up in this cycle of violence.
That's right. He sends everyone out somehow. Everyone, like I said, is sort of stopping their role. Because again, and explicitly in the beginning of the film, it says, the circus is the world. So therefore, everyone, audience, circus workers, everyone is all sort of involved in this this procedure, and they're all trapped in it.
It's
But-
really funny that the opening prologue, the guy was like, he straight up is like, the circus is the world. And then the first shot you see is like the circus coming to town with all of the countries on the side of it. Like,
Yeah, they really hit you in the head with it. But
What was at the World's Fair?
right,
yeah.
right. That probably would have proved to be like, very thematic visual image when being shown at the 1964 World's Fair. But what's interesting is, after the clown actually takes down the marionette show, he sees these empty harnesses. Everyone, audience included, is filing out of the theater. The clown could go with them, but no. What does he do? He voluntarily walks up to the harness. The great Magnus is still under the stage, like holding the ends of the marionettes, waiting for something to happen. The clown actually straps himself in, and Magnus raises him to the top. And this is when things get really insane. This is our final climax of the movie.
It takes a turn here.
Yeah, tell us about it, Grant.
Well, then so he has the harness on, and then they start lowering up the clown. Magnus starts bringing him up, so he does, and then he starts jittering around, right? Is that what happens? He like jitters around, and then it seems to be hung. He seems to have maybe hung the clown to die. And then the climax, though, is like the clown screams this like, a little bit of ecstasy, a lot bit of pain. This scream where there has been no talking this whole movie. The cry of the clown. Then he goes into total dead clown, just hanging there from the wires as though he's been hung.
It's really brutal and like really scary. And, calling back to like the story you told of your experience seeing this when you were quite young. I mean, I had my young, I had a very active imagination. I had my young mind wrecked by stuff that was like a lot tamer than this. This is very scary. Like, I don't know what to say.
Hey, this reminded me of something I forgot. So we had our little tiny church out in the woods, but then we were told that they were doing a Christmas pageant in the big city, which is this town of Waynesburg, right? I don't know. It's got like 1,000 people maybe in it. Maybe less. But that was like the big town. So they were putting on a big production, right? Inside the church. Here's all I remember is whoever in that small town, what was playing Jesus, was some sort of a small town method actor. So he didn't really put on any clothes under this kind of wrap he had, and then it kept falling down, and so he's running through the church, and they're trying to nail him up, and his junk is just flying around in the church. Just this naked man just flailing, and it was amazing. It was like half of the whole performance was just this naked dude in the church running around and then getting crucified, and him screaming, and that was shot in a different way. I'd forgotten about that, so we
that
started
kicks
talking parable.
so much ass. I all Christianity, in my opinion, needs a psychosexual bent to it. I think that's like deeply important to like getting the full message. Very glad that you were given the message properly at a formative age. So yeah, we're left with this striking image of a clown screaming in mostly agony with a little bit of ecstasy thrown in there. But this isn't quite the end. There
clown
is
screaming in agony and ecstasy sounds like Trump's Twitter account.
Shut the fuck up.
Another clown hoisted to the highest position in the circus.
But yeah, we still have the cycle. The cycle has yet to be completed. There is a bit of falling action in this film that's very important that completes the allegory.
Well, the very next thing that happens is that Magnus is kind of marionetting the dead clown, which is really creepy. I think that was actually the creepiest part for me.
Oh yeah, that's right. He's like
Very
dead
scary.
up there.
Yeah. And then he lowers him down, and he obviously kind of feels bad about it. And then it fades out, and we see him alone in his green room, his changing room, and he looks forlorn, and he has a big thing of white makeup in front of him, and he's starting to put the white makeup on his own face. And then that cuts to the same way we started in the beginning, which is he is on a mule going down the road, dressed as a clown.
Heading to the circus. And I don't mean Washington, D.C. Riding a donkey.
Yeah.
Yes. And thus ends the basic plot arc of the movie Parable. Now, even having described it, I still highly recommend anyone listening to watch it. It's only 22 minutes long, so it's bite sized and it's very powerful. I think anyone would really get a kick out of it who likes our show. As someone, I've been in the last couple of weeks, I've been like really reinvigorated into reading the Bible. So I just wanted to like jump into some discussions of the allegory by talking about some specific biblical passages that that came to mind while watching this for me. The first being the image of the clown, who at this point it's very obvious that the clown is Jesus. The image of the clown, on the donkey walking down the road. Has got to be a direct allegory to the story in the Bible that becomes the holy day of Palm Sunday. That actual chapter, that story appears in all the Gospels. In Matthew 21 is the story of Jesus' triumphant return to Jerusalem. He's going into Jerusalem. He knows he's going to be crucified. He's seen it all foretold. Everyone in his life is saying, do not go into Jerusalem. They're going to kill you. But he does it. He knows that this is what's going to happen to him. And he actually makes this arrival on a donkey, which is like a very undignified way to proceed, obviously. But he's still met with many like onlookers, and everyone loves him at that point. He's very popular among the common people. So we see this clown going down the road on a donkey, and that's a clown who knows he's gonna die.
Yeah, like the Joker.
Much like the Joker.
Movie
another film very inspired by Parable.
Controversial too.
And very controversial. So, that was one thing that came to mind. I also thought of when you were talking, Grant, about the clown screaming while hung up on the ropes. I thought of, Jesus on the cross, and he famously says, he takes it very stoically, except right at his moment of death, he calls out, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's a very, very powerful phrase. And I think that in so many words, that's what the clown was saying when he was hung up on the ropes like that.
Because Forsberg said it was all about the feeling, not the actual So,
Right.
You know, that's right on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, no, I was just saying, I really like that. I think it'd be fun to talk about that right now because like that differs so much from so much of the other films that we watch, which are like exactly the opposite.
And something we talked about in a recent podcast too was the difference between symbolism and signs. And we kind of realized that with most Christian movies we watch, they're just really, not actually symbolism. They're really blatant signs.
Right.
And with this, I would say there's more symbolism going on and more, like we were saying, with evoking a feeling rather than being like, this is what you are supposed to think.
Yes.
Well, this is what they would have done, right? After their service. This is the setup is the same as this podcast, where their church was all supposed to talk about what we're talking about right after this film. Where, I'm not so sure that happens in these other films that you're watching that are newer. I'm not familiar.
Yeah, no, that's a good point to bring that up, actually, because some of them do have Bible studies attached with them that give you talking points to go over with your family or your congregation or your Bible study.
I wonder if this would even really be considered like a Christian film if it didn't have the prologue at the beginning, or if it wasn't presented as a Christian film, because there's a lot of movies that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being Christian cinema that still follow the Jesus story, like The Matrix. And that's all I can think of right now.
No, totally. If they didn't have, I think they had to put that at the beginning to satisfy the Christian church that they're complaining, and then they had to put all that world stuff at the beginning because the World's Fair would have been like, what's this clown stuff? And they're like, oh, it's the world. Oh, okay. Because if they didn't say that, they would have just got this weird clown movie. So it's it's Jesus and the world.
It does feel a little tacked on there.
One thing just about the World's Fair backdrop to this as well, just like a small historical detail that we found that I just love the sound of is that this was screened at the Protestant pavilion of the World's Fair. I just want to say, I mean, the Protestant pavilion must have been fucking bumping.
Yeah.
Like that's where everything was going down. Like, let's get some brews, head over to the Protestant pavilion and just like, chill the fuck out and just like have a nice day in New York,
Handle the world's biggest snake.
Yeah. What else?
Grant, did they have a snake handling around your church growing up?
No, that would have been weird. Like we didn't like washing each other's feet was too extreme.
Yeah.
Like it couldn't be anything. It's
That's
all
so gross.
extreme.
I would rather handle the snake.
There's no better sound though. It's like I remember Faye Gray and these people like lean in, but it's all these country people, and the country people I grew up with had voices from like 1910, right? Like there would be like Mildred, like we went into town the other day, so we did. Saw the doctor there. He took my foot. Yes, he did. They talk like they're from another time. Like, I'm glad you boys came into town. But and so they had these kind of voices. So when they sang, like Leaning or Old Rugged Cross, it was incredible. Like all it was, there was like no talent. It was just like belief and emotion and accents. So they really believed it. They were emotional, and they had these real rural accents, and they sang like crazy. It was amazing. It was a great sound to hear.
I bet that's really beautiful.
Awesome.
I'm really enjoying hearing these stories of your specific upbringing.
If you have any recordings of those songs,
Yeah,
you could probably get a deal with Numero Group at a box set.
My grandma used to. There was something going on with all the churches, like Mount Carmel and Windy Gap. All these churches were part of this church circuit. And I think she didn't like what was going on. She thought somebody was up to no good. She thought maybe the pastor was up to no good. So she used to take this tape recorder and she'd hide it and then tape it and then leave the meeting so she would hear all the goings-ons, much like either Richard Nixon or Jay Leno.
Whoa.
And she would record it, and she had all those tapes where there's like all kinds of very Watergate-like rural church things going on.
God.
Oh my
Wait,
God.
did Jay Leno record people?
He hid behind, like he hid and said like in a closet or something, and then that's how he got the job over Letterman
Oh,
or something.
yeah.
It's in the closet.
Did she uncover anything on the tapes?
Yeah, she did. She heard all what was going on, and like then it was like a whole ordeal.
Oh, wow.
Like she
So
was
it was
like,
a
"No,
good
this
thing
can't happen."
that she.
Yeah,
Wow.
she was a very smart older
So the
lady.
NSA was right.
Yeah, she figured it out. So she, it was. I think like it was probably like if I could go back in time, it was like the best time to for Christianity was in like rural Pennsylvania in the like late 70s, early 80s, because there was it was old timey country people that like literally felt like they're right out of like 1800s. Then there was nothing but a bunch of Vietnam vets who decided I can't take society. They moved next door, and then the hippies came and they all built log cabins. So it was this weird like 1890s Vietnam hippie culture that was happening there that was creating this weird neighborhood that was really interesting. So I think it was like and then everyone who went to church like read the Bible and they believed in it rather than, and everyone was poor. It was kind of a fantastic little church.
And not a cell phone in sight.
No.
Well, you've a couple times during the film you mentioned that like you thought it had sort of a hippie aesthetic, and I think that's true to a point, but I don't know. I mean, I guess when we saw the interview with Rolf Forsberg, he was a bit older. He might not have been in his hippie days, but like, what about like the feeling of this film gave you hippie vibes?
It's a lot the way it's shot, and the movie reminds me a lot of Romero's Knight Riders in a way. And
I just watched.
Nice.
and just using Punch, which is a little Wicker Man there, but it has like sort of that. It's definitely everything about it feels like a hippie. It's like when the hippies rediscovered the Marx Brothers too, like that whole time. So it's kind of like this old timey comedy that's not, but what their version isn't very funny. But it's a little bit of all of that. I don't know. It's like I'm sure he wasn't a hippie, but neither was Jack Kirby. But they like tuned into something that was like super cosmic and wild.
It's very rare that we watch a movie for this podcast and it feels like the creator of the movie actually watches other movies or consumes other culture. And it feels like this guy has definitely seen movies before. Like a lot of times it kind of just feels like people don't do anything except read the Bible and watch like other Christian movies.
Right.
Also, who's making independent films at that time? Like who was just getting a camera and putting together films?
Yeah.
Not many
film
people.
buff.
So just
good
to
point.
be able to do that. I mean, he's no dummy, and he's pretty driven. Like there wasn't a lot of independent cinema.
Yeah, and this is a really high concept first film.
Yeah, and something I hadn't thought of with regards to like hippie films, but I think is dead on what you just said is, what was it about? Yeah, these ideas of like Punch and Judy and the Marx Brothers and sort of these like archetypal like comedy figures, like they represented like chaos in an ordered world or something like that. Like it's funny that those were the aesthetic points that evoked. Like Julian hates this shit.
I hate it
the
so
whole movie because I'm in the room with Julian and like during the whole time we were watching the movie, like all the music, he was like, I fucking hate this shit so much. I get it. It's it is like obnoxious in a way. But in this movie, I thought it was executed more charming. Maybe that was because this is like 22 minutes long as opposed to like 2 hours. But I don't know. What is it about those like those comedy figures that like invigorated the imagination of this era? I don't know.
It's that thing that people always say where it's like, oh, you can only trust the comedians. They're the only ones who tell the truth.
Who said that? Shakespeare?
I don't know. That was just the general discourse around the Daily Show in like the year 2006.
Right.
I feel like.
Right.
I hear you. Yeah. Well, it is King Lear.
And yeah, I don't know. I don't know why that is like a thing that just keeps coming up in 60s art satire or whatever is the role of the comedian. Artists who are obsessed with comedians make me fucking sick. It's disgusting.
Wow. Hot takes over here.
The clown helped them, though, because the people who first liked it was the Italian Catholic Church, who, of course, would like Commedia dell'arte and all the, buffo clown stuff. So I think that was his big break. Hey, what do you think of that guy, Luke?
You mean like the apostle?
Yeah, what do you think of that guy?
I mean, I'm more of a Matthew. Like, Matthew had the more sort of like straightforward telling, in my opinion, I guess. I don't know. What do you think of Luke?
He's like, I feel like he's the George Lucas of the Bible, right? Yeah, he like reverse engineered a spectacle.
That's interesting. What makes you say that?
Well, he's the one who wrote that. He's like, oh man, I have to get Jesus to Bethlehem, he's Jesus of Nazareth, but he was born in Bethlehem. And the reason he had to get him to Bethlehem because he had to somehow be related to David, right?
Right.
So he had to figure out, like, oh, but he's from Nazareth, but maybe his dad had to go back to Bethlehem because they were doing a census, and he had to go here and then go back. So he came up with this amazing idea to connect the Old Testament and the New Testament, which would be totally different, separate books. But he had this genius idea. If he could somehow get Jesus back to Bethlehem, and he had to figure out what that would be, then he could connect both books completely. So he kind of like, it's kind of like the prequel. And the other one, he figured out, like, he said he knew what was going on, but he didn't really know what was going on. So it was like this weird reverse engineer way to get Jesus to Bethlehem. And
Always retconning.
I feel is interesting about that Luke guy.
Yeah, king of retconning.
That is like George Lucas and the prequels.
And it's written totally different. His is like, and then he went to Bethlehem. It's like real talky.
Yeah.
It's like when you watch a TV show for many seasons, and then it's clear that it's being written by fans of the show instead of by the original writers.
Right.
Like Lost or something.
That's very true.
Any other thoughts, anything stuck in our minds about Parable that we want to make sure we tell people about before we get out of here today?
Every time you guys say parable, I keep thinking you're saying Powerball for a second.
Well, that's that Pennsylvanian in you.
We playing the Powerball.
Yeah, I know about the Powerball.
Yeah. You ain't gonna go down there and play the Powerball.
How is Parable pronounced in your dialect?
John Eagle. I tried to explain a Giant Eagle grocery store. I was in college, and I think I was in college, and I'd stolen something from the place and brought it to college, I guess. I was a thief in the night. And I remember telling them, they're like, hey, where'd you get that? And then I said, oh, I stole it from a giant eagle. And they were like, what? It was a much more interesting tale at that point. It was sort of a Harryhausen.
That's some American archetypal shit. That's some Thunderbird, American art. That's some John Bunyan type shit right there. I love that.
It was like the dumbest thing ever. It was like a bowl or something. I was on a quest to kill a giant eagle, and I got this little Tupperware bowl. Anyway, I thought it was important. I brought that up before I left.
Yeah. No, I think it's great. I really appreciate the fact that you in reminiscing about your early memories of Parable, that you were able to invite us into this world of rural Pennsylvanian Protestantism, which is I absolutely love your stories about it. I think they're very evocative. So thank you for that.
That's the power of cinema.
It's the power of cinema, baby. We love this shit. But I would say now would be a great time to give Parable the official Boys Bible Study rating. What do you say, boys? What do we think about this thing?
Well, this movie really made me think a lot and feel a lot. It was really powerful. I'll be remembering it for a long time, probably forever, throughout eternity. I'm going to have to give this a perfect review. I give it 4 out of 4 buckets of elephant urine.
Oh, man, that was mine. I thought of a better one, though. No, I mean, not bad. I thought of a different one. The music annoyed me. The vaudevillian stuff annoyed me. But, you can't argue with a classic story. So I'm going to give this movie, a perfect score of 435 clowns out of 435 clowns in the House of Representatives in the great circus that is Washington, D.C.
Well, as for me, like, I really love this movie. I think it was important to like go back to our roots of American Christian cinema. And also it was refreshing to see a filmmaker who, wasn't just playing like cheap pop cultural, like Christian scares, the way that, many of our favorite films are, but was really like tapped into the source, really talking about some archetypal things. So I've got to give it a Punch and Judy out of Punch and Judy. I think that this is a perfect film in every single way.
I give it a one horribly scarred child out of one. One for one. And I remembered it 40 years later, and I still don't remember the last two scenes. I remember him being hung, and then the last, I don't know if the guy cries or not, but in my mind he cries, because for 40 years in my mind he cried. Yeah. So I still don't know. So, but it was a beautiful film that totally scarred and damaged me.
If it hadn't traumatized you, you wouldn't be here right now.
No.
Discussing this. You're kind of like the great Magnus at the end, becoming the Christ-like figure.
It'd be great if after this I went back to the country and started preaching, just in the loop of Magnus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm in the parable.
Yeah, last I'm like really excited to like talk Pennsylvania with someone. Last thing I'll say is that I was actually born in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. So, very, very biblical section of Pennsylvania. And we have like the star on the mountain in Bethlehem. Like anywhere you look, you can see the star and follow the star toward Bethlehem as the wise men did. Pretty cool. So,
hey, if you came to our Christmas pageant, you would have heard a 7-year-old me sing "O Little Town of Bethlehem" that was played on a recorder, a reel-to-reel tape, and they play it through the speakers. But then as they played it for like 15 years, so I went back with like a girlfriend to watch it, and then you'd hear me, but it'd be like, oh, yeah, like it was all kind of distorted from the tape being ever, and it was like me as a child distorted. Anyway, and we were from Aleppo. That was the little town there, because they all had Christian names over there. So we were from Aleppo.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's so many Christian named towns and cities over there. There's Egypt. There's Nazareth, not too far from where I grew up. I did not know you had Aleppo near you. That's interesting.
There's like 10 people that live there, but there was Aleppo.
Well, Grant, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, anything you want to plug? Anything for our listeners to know about?
We have at the American Cinematheque, we have our own podcast, the American Cinematheque Show, where we take Q&As we've done over the last since the 80s and put them into a theme. And I normally have a guest on. I talk to them, and then we play old clips, whether it be Vincent Price or Andre de Toth or Dennis Hopper, whoever it is, we play in between our archived. We're given a grant from the Hollywood Foreign Press to make that happen. So that's my little pitch. American Cinematheque Show. Check it out.
That's amazing. Yeah, I hope everyone will check that out. On the Boys Bible Study side, of course, if you enjoy these episodes, please think about subscribing to our Patreon. We make at least 2 bonus episodes every month. And if you pledge $5 a month or more at patreon.com/boysbiblestudy, you can listen to those. We also have some streams coming up. First week of December. What's that? December 6th? Scott, I'm looking at a calendar.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. On December 6th, we will be doing a stream on the Everything is Terrible Twitch channel. Check out twitch.tv/everythingisterrible666. Join us for a surprise Christian movie then. The week after that, December 13th, our patrons will have an exclusive stream for everyone who subscribes. Our outro music is Oh My God by Mary. And from all of us here at Boys Bible Study, myself, Ash, my co-hosts, Scott and Julian, and our guest today, Grant Moninger, we say, peace be with you.
And also with you.
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I feel your love in me, it's coming from within. Oh my God, my devotion is so unwavering. Divine emotions when you enter me. Every day